All right, welcome everyone to the next EMS webinar. Today we have Professor Hannah Roth with us, who's going to talk about hollow fiber membrane development. So Hannah completed her studies in chemical engineering at Aachen University in 2014. She earned her doctoral degree also in chemical engineering in 2021. Her doctoral research was conducted under the supervision of Professor Matthias Wessling, and she worked on the development of hollow fiber membranes since then. So Hannah also worked in the industry, and then she returned to Aachen University, and later on she was appointed as an assistant professor at the Membrane Science and Technology cluster at the University of Twente. She's a council member of the EMS and also part of the steering committee of the World Association of Membrane Societies. She's a special issue editor for the Desalination Journal, and she's an early career board member for JMS. So Hannah, the stage is yours, and I'll be back to assist with the questions after your presentation. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Georgie, EMS council colleague, for the nice introduction. And I'm very excited to be able to present the hollow fiber development that I have been conducting over quite a few years now today here in the EMS webinar. I think Georgie already summarized this very well. So I have done my studies in Aachen and also did my PhD there. My short trip to industry was in a startup company that came also out of the group of Matthias Wessling, where I worked on sales and marketing of a research data management software. And then I came back to the group in Aachen as research group leader. And now I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Membrane Science and Technology, or in how we call ourselves to the outside, in the team of the Twente membranes. And today I will be presenting mostly work that was done in Aachen, but that of course is the basis and the initiation of the ideas that I follow today at the University of Twente with my group here. Here in Twente, we have now more than 50 years of experience in research on membranes. And there's a lot of PhD students that came out of here, publications and patents along with it. And we can see that most of them, or that almost half of them, actually stay in the membrane field. And on the side, we also see that recipes developed here have led also to spin-off companies in field of membrane, membrane production, but also like Convergence or EMI Twente, who provide technology for membranes or know-how. And then also the development of the gas separation membranes of Evonik have been initiated here out of the Twente membranes team. So our mission is to work on a sustainable future with membrane technology. But what is even more important is to educate people on membrane science. Our PhD students here, who then later on continue innovating the field of membranes in their positions after their PhD research here at the University of Twente. And we are quite a big team here in the department with professors of all kinds of membrane backgrounds where we can really initiate very fundamental, but also within the membrane field interdisciplinary projects. And we have even an additional add-on, which is the spin-off company EMI Twente, that is actually located at the University of Twente with us, who work on using the knowledge to transfer it into actual products together with industry. And what I would like to show you today is the development work on hollow fiber membranes that I have been part of in the last years. So you can see here a SEM image of a porous hollow fiber membrane. These are then, of course, made in large quantities, a lot of meters and meters of hollow fiber membranes, which then together in a bundle, potted into a hollow fiber module, actually make then the separation happen, where the feed can enter from the one side, for example, to the inside of the hollow fiber, and through the semi-permeable selective layer and porous support structure, then certain components can permeate through and the separation is carried out. And how are these hollow fiber membranes made? It starts with a polymer solution, which consists of a polymer and a potent solvent that can dissolve this polymer into a homogeneous solution. And then this is brought into contact with a non-solvent. And this is done on the one hand through the Bohr solution, which is co-extruded with the polymer solution through a spinneret. So the circular opening here is where the polymer solution flows through, and on the inside, the lumen, the Bohr fluid, is introduced, and that gives then the geometry, and at the same time the non-solvent, which often is water, then starts the coagulation process from the inside of the hollow fiber, while the fiber, after falling through an air gap, is immersed into a coagulation bath, also containing the non-solvent, then also starting phase inversion from the outside. And what is happening in this coagulation process is that non-solvent is intruding into the polymer solution and solvent is being washed out, and then the polymer that initially was dissolved in the solvent is then precipitating in a porous way. And the forming fiber is transported through this coagulation bath, through rinsing baths, and then, and this transportation happens due to a motor-driven pulling wheel, and this, can run hours, days, weeks, in a continuous fabrication of hollow fiber membranes. Of course, in the lab, it runs for a shorter time, and then we collect our membrane samples. But what is happening actually in this phase inversion process? So as I said, we start out with a polymer solution that contains solvent and a bit of polymer, typically around 15 to 30% of polymer, and this forms a homogeneous solution. And when we bring this into contact with a non-solvent, typically water, we then start to move through this ternary phase diagram. And what we see is that here on this side, where only polymer and solvent are present, this is a homogeneous solution. But passing through the binoble and then the spinoble brings us into a two-phase region where the system separates into two in equilibrium phases, and then by further washing out the solvent, we end up in on the other side of the ternary phase diagram, where we have only polymer and non-solvent present, and our polymer is then present in a porous structure where the pores are filled with the non-solvent. And the beauty of the hollow fiber spinning process is not only that we have this nice geometry that can easily be made into a module, as we saw a couple of slides earlier, but also that we have the option to tune the way the solution passes through this ternary phase diagram almost separately on both sides. So we can have, by a certain composition of the lumen fluid, a different way of going through the ternary phase diagram on the lumen side than, for example, on the shell side, which leads to having different porosities, different pore sizes, very asymmetric structures in our hollow fibers, where we, of course, want to have on one side typically a very thin and the smallest porous or even dense layer for the separation, while the rest of the structure is as open as possible to have, well, still mechanical support, but not too much additional resistance. So when we look now at the parameter room that we have in hollow fiber spinning, and I did not include that, of course, this starts already with having to decide on a polymer, a solvent, and a non-solvent. So we take this as given now in this diagram. But when we have these three choices done, we still have all of these parameters to choose from and to vary to change the structure of the final hollow fiber. Of course, not all combinations of parameters will result in a stable hollow fiber membrane, but there is a lot of room typically in recipes to then tune the structure by varying these parameters. And here in Twente, we have the ideal situation that we have very small spinning lines, or that we have one very small spinning line, a bench top line, and we can then scale up to lab scale and to a pilot line to really start with small recipes to test, to do initial testing, but then we can also scale up to go to relevant sizes of modules in the end. And I will now, in the rest of the presentation, show you research done on novel hollow fiber membranes, mostly, and also a few flat sheet experiments. And there will be 5 different topics that I will cover, and one in the end that I think will be the future, where I will need all of you to help in the future. But I will start with novel geometries, which is was the PhD work of Mike Tepper, where by using a structured needle of the spinneret and then additionally rotating this during the spinning, you can see that this novel geometry is imprinted into the forming hollow fiber here. And since the polymer solution in the beginning is still transparent, you can nicely see how it first coagulates on the inside, creating the structure. And then later on, the final membrane looks like this. And we could show that this new structure really enhances the performance of the membranes due to induced mixing on the inside, so reduction of concentration polymerization. But if you're interested in this, you can also check out the EMS webinar that Mike Tepper gave on this topic and find out all the details of this topic. Another change in the traditional way of spinning hollow fibers is the concept of chemistry in the spinneret. And the idea is that many membranes now rely on starting with a porous structure that really, as I already said in the beginning, is there to provide a mechanical support and as little as needed resistance. And this is then post-modified with another material, which gives a particularly good separation characteristic. So one example is the interfacial polymerization technique, where one component is where the porous support is soaked in one component and then brought into contact with a solution containing another reactant. These two then react at the interface, and a composite structure is the outcome, where, as said, the porous structure gives the support, and the thin film on top gives the good separation characteristics. And of course, the benefit of this system is that you can combine two different materials which have their strengths on either side. But on the other hand, this makes the production process very elaborate. And our idea was to find a way to do this directly in one single step, to make hollow fiber membranes with coated with a different material on the surface. And the idea is to have this on the inside of the hollow fiber, as this is most difficult to reach. And what we did is we added a reactant to the bore fluid and another reactant to the polymer solution, which then react at the interface of the bore fluid and polymer solution after the spinneret. And at the same time that this cross-linking reaction is happening, also phase inversion is started by coming into contact with the non-solvent from the bore fluid and the coagulation bath. And in my PhD time, I worked intensively on this topic, and then also continued working on ideas with group members in Aachen then, and now also my PhD students here in Twente further continue innovating with this concept. And I want to show here now the earliest publications on this, where I showed how polyethylene imine can be cross-linked both from the bore fluid, as it is water soluble, and then combined with TMC from the polymer solution, which is a typical cross-linker, also known for reverse osmosis membranes. And these two then cross-link on the inside while the phase inversion is happening. But you can also switch around this system, and polyethylene imine also dissolves in the polymer solution, and combined with a water-soluble cross-linker, it can also react to a dense separation layer. And in some images, you can see very well that there's a layer on the inside of this hollow fiber, while also the porous structure beneath forms very well. And you can also see that it is well integrated into the structure, which sometimes when you post-modify a surface can be an issue that you have delamination there. And also the other system creates a cross-linked layer. And you can even see this better when we redissolve the porous support where no cross-linking reaction has happened. So this is still soluble in the solvent, while the cross-linked structure is not anymore. So you see here very well the cross-linked polyethylene imine with the TMC, and the glutaraldehyde cross-linked separation layer even has a nice red color on the inside. And what we achieved with this concept is that we reached nanofiltration characteristics in regard of molecular weight cutoff, and we had pure water permeabilities around 3, and for the glutaraldehyde system at around 0.5 LMH per bar. And what you can see is that not all of the amine groups of the polyethylene imine are cross-linked, since we have a very strong positive charge shown by the high calcium chloride retention, and then decreasing retentions for the other salts. But overall, we could show that it is that we achieve nanofiltration characteristics with the chemistry in a spinneret approach. And as said, this is just the initial research that we did on it, and this concept can be now, of course, and has also been expanded to different material systems. Another system that I worked on myself and also with PhD students is to use microgels as functionalization of membranes and hollow fiber membranes. And these are the final membrane structures. You can see here a flat sheet membrane that is spray coated with a functionalized, with an amine functionalized microgel, and that in the end showed CO2 selective separation behavior. And on the other side, you can see that we can also introduce these microgels directly into the spinning of hollow fiber membranes. And when they are put into the bore fluid during spinning, you see that they adhere to the inside of the hollow fiber. And since some images are made under dry conditions, you can imagine that when they come into contact with water, they really swell and take up a multiple of the size as they show up here, and then they cover the whole membrane surface. And how we made them is we used a single step and continuous fabrication method by using a flow reactor. On the left side, you see how we made the amine functionalized microgels. So we have a NIPAM, the crosslinker and initiator to start with. So the microgels initially start to react, and you can see here in the video also how that looks then. So once the solution starts to become milky, first particles have formed, and then by adding the amine component and initiator in between two of the flow reactors, we can then get a core shell structure of these microgels to have a certain functionality on the outside of the microgel. And this can then be incorporated, these microgels, into the hollow fiber spinning process. Further, I also worked on hollow fiber membranes for dialysis applications. So actually the largest amount of hollow fibers is needed for these medical applications. As the hollow fiber modules are single-used, they are in contact with the blood of sick patients, and they need this treatment approximately 3 times per week. So there's a huge amount of membrane modules needed for this application. And what is happening is that the blood of the patient is taken outside of the body. It flows through the inside of very thin hollow fiber membranes, and on the outside a dialysate is flown, is circulated. And in the dialysate, then uremic toxins, urea are accumulated there, so they are transported over the membrane, while of course important components of the blood, like the blood cells and the protein serum albumin, is retained. And this is for patients that have kidney failure, so where the kidney does not work anymore. However, when you look at this now, there's one piece missing, because if you just take the blood of a patient outside of the body and bring it into contact with artificial surfaces, we have blood clotting occurring and thrombosis happening. So what is done is that these patients get heparin, an anticoagulant, injected. And there are patients that are intolerant to heparin, but also for the patients that can tolerate heparin, these high doses of heparin can lead to additional complications, and they have to stay longer during the treatment to wait until the heparin is until there's less heparin in the body, so that they don't have the risk of going into a bleeding complication. So what we worked on is whether we can make the surface of these membranes heparinized. So by binding heparin to the surface of a dialyzer, of a dialysis membrane, we can potentially circumvent having to inject heparin into the patients. And what is especially of importance, that it is a cheap solution to heparinize the surface, because, as I said, this is a mass market, and there is not much room for extra costs. But what is the case is that these membranes are typically made out of polyether sulfone, which is has a negative surface charge, and also the heparin is negatively charged. So what we did is we incorporated positively charged, cheap, simple chemistry molecules into the hollow fibers to have an anchor for the heparin. And two of the things that we tested were dopamine and chitosan. And I will show now the results of the chitosan system. So you can see, when adding chitosan to the polymer solution, we still can get a porous structure, an open porous structure, a typical hollow fiber shape. So this was the proof of concept that we can use chitosan as an additive, and that it does not affect the phase inversion and the spinning process. Additionally, we could show that when we bring the reference membrane, as said, typically slightly negative charged, when we bring this into contact with heparin, we do get a bit of a switch in the surface charge, which is here shown by the theta potential, into the negative region, which means that some of the heparin does adsorb to the surface. But in contrast, when we add chitosan to the polymer solution, we achieve initially very positively charged membrane, which then, when brought into contact with the heparin, switches into a much more negative surface, which shows that much more of the heparin is immobilized on the surface that is later in contact with blood. And as a final test, we also did, together with a partner, we tested these surfaces on blood. And what you can see here is the thrombin-antithrombin complex, which shows the coagulation of the blood. And you can see that the really blank sample, or the blood at right after the donor gave the blood, there were no thrombin-antithrombin complex in the solution. While when you already brought it into the test tube where the further test was carried out, you can see that one of the donors is already the donor blood is already starting to form some of these complexes. And then the test was carried out with several different membranes that we made in the lab, just the reference membrane itself, and this one with heparinization, where you can already see a slight decrease here. But then when you really look to the very right side, you see that with the highest chitosan concentration, where the only chitosan modified membrane still creates quite some complexes, you see that the heparinized version of it achieves very low thrombin-antithrombin complexes. So we have created with this a very good anti-heparinized surface that reduces the coagulation. And what you can also see, though, is that it's in this biomedical application, it really also depends a lot on the specific donor, on the person. But we could show that with this final membrane, we achieve even a good result for the a bit more difficult donor number 3. So I would now like to go into a topic where the membrane, the porous structure evolves by a different procedure. So we have now talked a lot about organic solvents dissolving the polymer, and these organic solvents are often very reprotoxic. There's a big field also of testing new solvents which are less toxic. But one approach that we have followed is to switch to a completely organic solvent-free system and use water instead. And this then makes it necessary to also start the polymer system. And by using charged polyelectrolytes, these are charged polymers, and these are, each of them are soluble in water. But when you bring them together into water, they form solid complexes. So the charged groups, they cross-link with each other and form a solid complex. However, when adding salt to this solution, you can dissolve these polyelectrolytes. And when you have really enough salt to screen the charges of the polyelectrolytes, you can get a homogeneous polymer solution out of this. And another way of doing this is using a pH shift. So there are also polyelectrolytes that are charged in certain pH regions and then become uncharged. This is another approach to getting such polyelectrolyte systems with opposite charge into solution. But I have mostly worked with the salt by using a high salt concentration to dissolve these structures. But when you now look backwards, you see that in between of a solid complex and a homogeneous polymer solution is a system that has two different phases. And this is also what we saw earlier in the phase separation system. And we need these two different phases to have then a structure that makes the polymer, that is later the polymeric structure, and we need the other phase to have open pores in that structure. And this is what we can use also this system for. So we can we can use it as a polymer solution and do hollow fiber spinning, and by bringing it into contact with water, which will then reduce the concentration of the salt in the polymer solution, which then at some point initiates the phase separation into polymer-rich and polymer-lean phases, which are the polymer backbone of the porous structure, and the polymer-lean phase then becoming the open pores. And it was possible to make hollow fiber membranes out of this structure. But what you can see, we have a porous support structure. We have, in this case, a dense separation layer on the inside, but you can also see that they are not very stable. We have very low burst pressures, and when you immerse them into water, because they are very highly charged, they swell a lot. But by cross-linking the charged groups of the structure, for example, with this UV responding cross-linker, we were able to stabilize the structure and make it mechanically more strong, So at the moment, we have achieved around 6 bars of burst pressure, and overall, these hollow fibers were then also testable in a permeation mode, and we have a very low molecular weight cutoffs of 500 Dalton, and still low permeabilities, but this is something to improve in the future. And I will also be continuing to work on this novel membrane fabrication technique in the future, trying out different cross-linking procedures to really get the charged groups cross-linked to make these even more ready to be used in aqueous applications. And what is also worth looking in is that when you don't use them in aqueous environments, these ionically cross-linked groups will of course be also very stable. So there we can even, we could even use these membranes without cross-linking. And this brings me to the last and final part of the presentation, which will be about how we can accelerate the future of hollow fiber development. And I have said we have solvents that are reprotoxic that we need to replace. We have polymers that are based on fluorocompounds, which are maybe in the future not be allowed to be used for membrane applications. So we will need to look for new polymers. And we also have a lot of new separation tasks coming up that are maybe in combination with looking at a world that needs to be more and more electrified or based on other things than fossil fuels. So I think we have a lot to do in the future, but I also showed you in the beginning that there are many, many parameters to tune hollow fiber spinning. And at the moment, it is really more or less a trial and error way of developing hollow fibers, of course, with an educated guess of knowing which parameters work well and how they influence membrane structures. But a key will be in the future to really have these recipes and characteristics not only in very many separate places, strongly bound to the people who did these experiments, but in a more available database so that we can connect all these puzzle pieces together. And one initiative that stands out there is the Open Membrane Database that has already started to gather data of hollow fiber manufacturing, but also a lot of data on membrane characteristics. And my vision is that hollow fiber membranes also become a topic on the Open Membrane Database so that we can from there collect all of our data, but then also use it together in a artificial intelligence and neural networks to predict and design the hollow fiber membranes that we actually need in the future. And this is also my call to all that are listening today who are also working on hollow fiber development to, let's join and make an initiative and try to gather our data together and use it to create something even bigger. And with this, I'm at the end of the scientific part of my presentation. But before stopping, I would like to also make some advertisement that we always have special issues on desalination. Please have a look, check them out. They are often also very fitting to membrane research, and I would be happy to see many of your manuscripts coming in. And then as a council member of the EMS, I'm also asking all of you, it started today, to vote now. We have great candidates on the list who want to be part of the next EMS Council, and I would like to have any of those as my future colleagues, but make use of it, take the chance, have a look at the candidates and see what resonates best with you, so that we have a great next council to work with then in the next 2 years. And with this, I would like to thank especially Matthias Wessling in Aachen, who were the first authors, the collaborators on the research that I showed today. And I really want to thank the team here in Twente, my PhD students, but also all colleagues around here who push these topics to new frontiers now on this side. And thank you out there for listening, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions.
All right, thank you, Hannah. It was a very informative and comprehensive overview of hollow fibers, and particularly your work covering the basics through the design and then specific applications. I'm pretty sure there will be some questions from the audience, so I'm going to hold my questions and look at the chat.
Maybe they're all busy now voting for the next EMS Council. But you can wait. It's still open till end of October, so enough time to check out the candidates and make a vote in your preference.
Definitely. I don't see any questions at the moment. Okay, the first question is in. All right, thank you for the presentation. One question regarding the first part of the lecture. What could be the added value of combining two membrane preparation steps in one?
Well, so that's the core idea of the chemistry in the Spinneret. And aside from resulting in interesting membrane structures and great ways of studying the fundamentals of phase separation, of course, when we look at making composite membranes at the moment, or the layer by layer technique, we have very many steps in making the membrane. So first starting making a porous support, and then in the interfacial polymerization case, soaking it in one component, then the other, then washing it again. So by putting all of this into one single step, of course, there can be a lot of time saved in the production. And as I said, also by combining these two, we have a better adherence of these two materials as they evolve into one structure and are not coated on top of each other. So these are two very strong arguments to do this in one step. And then also, as it is, for example, at the moment, to the best of my knowledge, there is no hollow fiber membrane with an interfacial polymerized layer on the inside on the market. So that opens completely new avenues to change the geometry also, where we then have a hollow fiber geometry, which is easier to pot. We have no dead zones in these modules. So if this also gives the opportunity to go to hollow fiber geometry, there's even more benefits from this.
Thank you, Hannah. I think that answers the question. I don't see any other questions, so let me ask mine. You were talking about these charged polyelectrolyte membranes. And do you think they have a potential in the dialysis application? Do you want to combine this application with these new types of materials, or?
Yes, I think they do. But, well, dialysis is also an aqueous system. And as I said, what is at the moment the limiting factor there is really the swelling. With this first cross-linking technique that we showed, we can diminish that, but that is still something to work on in the future, and then getting it more permeable. So more open porous would be very essential for the dialysis application. But generally, I do see the possibility to use them there. And since we work with a water-based system in the fabrication, this also offers, I didn't show it here, but we have also added enzymes into the solution, which would have not been possible when using a very strong organic solvent. So on this biomedical field, it opens a lot of possibilities of adding such additives in there that are not compatible with organic solvents.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you mentioned swelling. I have not worked with hollow fibers too much, but how does the swelling of hollow fibers compare with the flat sheet counterparts? If you're using the same type of polymer and solvent, you make flat sheet membranes and hollow fibers, then is there a trend?
So the swelling issue, or the swelling that I mentioned here, is now for the polyelectrolyte system, so that very charged system. For the phase separated systems, we don't see swelling there. So that's but in that sense, you can compare the flat sheet and hollow fibers, I think, quite well, in the sense how the structures.
So the morphology is more or less the same, irrespective of the geometry of the membrane.
Yeah, I mean, it depends then on how the fabrication is, of course. The fabrication parameters in hollow fibers give you a bit more the opportunity to tune both of the sides, very separately, while in flat sheets you're a bit more limited in that.
Okay, thank you. Let me check the chat. Okay, I think we have no more questions. So I think we can close the webinar now. Thank you, Hannah, again for being here with us today and for the excellent presentation. And I'm looking forward to having everyone back in 1 month. So the next EMS webinar will be on the 6th of November. Thank you for the attendance, and thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.